I put Frank Coffield's name up here because I've been working with him on this kind of thing. Frank Coffield wrote Why the Shepherd Doesn't Change Its Spots about Ofsted recently, but he's sunning himself in Spain at the moment. I'm going to cover three things here. One, I'm going to pick up a couple of points that kind of left hanging, I think. The second is to talk about transforming inspection for good and how we might do that, thinking about that, which is what we've been working on for some time. And also to suggest that actually now we need a new direction. Never mind just transforming it, we need to take a new approach to inspection. So picking up the 2 points. So I want to remind people, if they didn't already know, Carol Fitzgibbon, yes, who the scourge of Ofsted, travelled to the UK and internationally talking about inspection. And she set up at that time in 1992-93, OFSTIN, Office for Standards in Inspection. She set it up with people who were retired so that Ofsted couldn't get at them. Well, it's so long ago now, they've all passed away, or almost all. Poor Carol went to California to look after her grandchildren, but she got Parkinson's and the grandchildren looked after her. She toured England, a scourge of Ofsted, and I've seen Ofsted inspectors, even in the last decade, quivering as they hear Carol Fitzgibbon's name and how she was so incisive in what she had to do. She railed against its lack of reliability and accountability of Ofsted. So the reliability might seem like an add-on, but if you think that Ofsted are going to come in and it's like rolling the dice, that's all dependent on the reliability. Having got that right, of course, it might still be biased, but you've got to get it reliable, consistent from one to another. And they've had 30 years to do it, and they haven't. And the present format, I would argue, is going to make it less reliable than it was before. So more happenstance. And accountability, how can we have a system that destroys people's lives, but they've got no sense in which they can appeal against that judgment? Well, these are the arguments that have been there for years. We're still talking about it. Let me come back to that in a moment. Okay, second point. So Ofsted exists to raise standards and improve lives. That's on their website.
Yes.
So by standards, they mean literacy and numeracy. We might disagree and have other ideas to what standards mean, but they mean literacy and numeracy. So there has been no change in standards, literacy and numeracy levels in Ofsted's lifetime. And I say that as someone who's written several academic papers on this area. And we've just heard from John Banks about PISA and OECD and Andrea Schleicher. So the PISA has been looking at the end of children's compulsory education across the OECD and the rest of the world, the affluent countries of the world. They've really worked on getting that system working. So every 3 years is a test of a representative sample of the countries that we're talking about. The test itself is made so that whatever score you get now, 490, it means the same as 20 years ago, 490. A-levels and GCSE don't do that. They've got great inflation and goodness knows what, but PISA is solid over the years. How do we look over the years? Well, here you see a graph. I'm sorry, it seems to be missed off on the right-hand side of mine. You can see a graph there. So the one in red, coming right from the left-hand side, is reading literacy. A score of 500 is the OECD average. So we started off a bit above average, and we finished up a bit below average. Those children are the product of Ofsted inspected schools and colleges. Or if you look at the next one down here on mathematics, that seemed to rise a little bit, 2018, but it's down again. Hardly claimed to improve standards. And what about science? It remained constant, and now it's been falling away. I've got to say that these changes are small. So a score of 100 here is a standard deviation. So 20 on that is 0.2 of an effect size. And if the OECD find an intervention which has an effect size of 0.2, they're crowing about it. That's a big deal. But it's tiny. If you were a teacher and you noticed that the class had improved by 0.2, you wouldn't notice it. You'd need a change of about 0.6. So Ofsted, and this is the system praised by Gove. He regarded it as the be-all and end-all. We should have tied his salary to it, shouldn't we? Okay. So the website here, Inspect for Good, which Frank and I set up, it explains what we were talking about, and it comes in two parts here. The first is the idea that we should have reforms as experiments. We shouldn't, as policymakers, sit down and regard the way the world is and say, that's it, you've got it, which is basically what we do in this country and in most countries. Donald Campbell, who wrote the paper on reforms as experiment, was from the United States. And this has been implemented, this idea that actually I've got this thing that looks as though it's going to work, but let's try it out and see if it works. So we should be reforming as experiments, but it's not going to be all and end all. And with that in mind, and thinking about Bridget Phillipson, we want to suggest that we should trial a new system of inspection in a swathe of England, which is representative of England, crossing several LEAs and several MATs. And we run that new system for 5 years. And at the end of it, we compare their results with the results of business as usual Ofsted and take the best of those and take it forward. So it's saying Bridget Phillipson doesn't have to tear up and walk away from it. She can trial a new system under this, reforms as experiments, and take that forward and learn. And in fact, the idea of reforms as experiments applies to almost every area of policy that exists. But this particular one, I think, is important. That's the first thing. So we have an idea of a way that you can do a new system. And it isn't far from what we've been hearing earlier. And we called it peer-to-peer or head-to-head inspection. And you'd start off with the school doing self-inspection. That's the first stage. You then get a nominated group from one school, the head plus a couple of other people, who go into that school and look at what they've done and inspect. It has to be a similar kind of establishment. So if it's a special school, then it goes into a special school. If it's preschool, then it's preschool, and so on. So you go in and they look at what the self-evaluation has done and they probe it. But they do have an edge to themselves so that there is an accountability bit. If they see something that's wrong, they're going to do something about that. So they inspect as a critical friend, and the feedback comes into there. And then if they do find a serious problem, they flag it up, but they don't produce a report on that serious problem, which is what you'd get in Ofsted, where you're told something and then it goes an HMI to check it over. But once you've said to somebody who's going to come in and do the inspection, you want to watch the head, I'm not sure about them, then in comes the inspectors, they're already mindsetted to look for it. So this would trigger a second blind inspection from a different group who don't know it and see if they spot the same problem that was originally curtailed. We would expect to see agreed reports which are published. So between the school and then checking with the external person, you get an agreed report. If there's no agreement, then you must go to an arbitrator in order to take that forward. Now, you might be thinking this sounds a bit cozy with one group going in and inspecting another group. But in fact, what you would do is to take one head and a group goes into this school goes into a different school, that school goes into a different school, and you get a kind of a matrix arrangement whereby you don't get re-inspection by yourself. So there's a system to be worked out there, and there is actually peer-to-peer existing now as a business to look at that, and that's been well praised by Ofsted as a way to improve schools by feedback into the schools. And you should have an advisory board that oversees this. We recommend an international advisory board. Portugal have some interesting inspection. Yeah. Finland have some interesting inspection, and so on. Okay, enough for the ways that we think that things could be improved by reforms as experiments and peer-to-peer. It shifts your inspection from summative to formative. So instead of being decision-making, it's about improving the system, which everybody says. Okay. But what I really want to say to you is about direct action.
Fantastic.
So since 1992, the unions, academics, former HMI, collectivists, Frank Norris, teachers, educationists, they've been criticising Ofsted seriously and continuously. about its impact that it's having or not having, about the methodology that it's using, about the value for money. If we're asked, how much money does Ofsted cost? What's the benefit? What's the value for money? And the answer is, blah, 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 blah. It's just not there. And that's officially stated. All to no avail. We need to shift this system. We need direct action. And what do I mean by that? Well, there are several possible routes. So one, my ears picked up with as a former person who was inspected writing a play about the way Ofsted impacts on individuals. I think there's a television program made about suicides. It would go absolutely and shift people's thinking, because we need to get at the heart that other people can't get at. So something like that might work. I was thinking also maybe we could all have stickers and we could put them on Ofsted inspectors' cars. I was thinking also we could name and shame bad inspectors, but I think that's probably illegal. So my idea that I have, together with Frank, is that what we do is establish an independent register of experiences of Ofsted inspections. It must be independent. It's not Ofsted who would ask for this. So we have a website in which people can go and report their experiences on a scale like, a sliding bond that you would do it fair to unfair, and you pick out where you sit on that for your inspection that you just had. So once the Ofsted report appears, and it appears online, we would have a bot, a computer program that searches that and finds that inspection reports. It takes out the head's name together with the school, and it writes a letter to the school, which we've got somebody putting a stamped attached envelope, and the school head gets the letter with a code, a 5-letter code. She goes to the website, enters the 5-letter code, and does the ratings. If we do that on a continuous and regular basis, then we would have a way in which we start to find the institutions that are rated well by Ofsted but got poor ratings, or vice versa. And it builds up a system of databases that we can essentially, an inspector goes in knowing that they're going to be rated on the quality of what they've done. We would also record who the chief inspector was for that particular inspection. And then we would be able to start to say, well, there's 3 occasions when that particular inspector was giving ratings that were seen to be unfair, or whatever else. Okay. So we produce regular reports, which we would send to the chief HMI, which we would send to Bridget Phillipson, which we would send to the unions. And it's the way to start to hold Ofsted to account.